In this presentation, we're going to take a look at backup options related to our accounting data. Let's zoom into it with Xero. Here we are in our demo company Xero dashboard. Note that we're going to be thinking about the backup files now. When you're thinking about backup files, you may be comparing and contrasting them. You kind of have to think of the purpose of the backup files. And oftentimes, if you're moving from like a desktop type of accounting software to an online type of accounting software, you got to think about what the design of the backup files are and what they're used for, what they're thought of to be used for by the designers of the software. In other words, if you're moving from something, I'm going to jump over to like a QuickBooks desktop, then you might be used to backing up your data files. Now, remember, the major purpose of the backing up the data files is usually to not lose your data. So as you work all day, you don't want to lose your data, and therefore you back up the data files. Now, the desktop version, of course, is on your desktop, and therefore, if your desktop was the hard drive was to go down, if there was a fire in your apartment or something like that, or at your office or wherever you are, then you'd lose all your data, or that you'd lose the data that would be in there. Therefore, you have to make a backup file, and the general idea there would be that you want to make the backup file to something other than the drive that the actual data file is on, like another hard drive. And then if it was on another hard drive, then if the computer crashed that your data file was on, the backup file would be on another hard drive and you'd be okay. But then what if there was a fire in the whole house and both the backup file and the data file burned up or something like that? Well, then you could like take that hard drive and you could take it from the office home every night, and then you have the backup files in a different location. You could do something like that, right? Or you can use an online backup and back up something online. So then if there's a fire and like California had a big earthquake and fell in the ocean, then at least my data would be secure because it would be online in some other location. And you can so you could do that. That's basically kind of the purpose that QuickBooks is usually thinking about with the backup files. And that kind of backup file system is pretty secure on something like an online system. Both QuickBooks Online and Xero have basically backing up the data on their servers, right? So their servers are being backed up in a more efficient way than most normal companies or smaller companies can back up the data on their own computer system. We don't have the double, backing up whatever system. So we have to use a hard drive or backup online in some way. So from that perspective, you don't really have to do anything, and your file should be as backed up, probably at least as good or more as good from you just basically having a fire or something, or your computer crashing and losing all your data. That's the major purpose, and you're probably more secure with an online system than most backup kind of systems you'd put together on your own. Now, the problem is there's other reasons you might want a backup file. For example, like if I had multiple, if I wanted to practice within QuickBooks Online, then, or be a student within QuickBooks Online, then I might want the backup files so that I can basically start a new company file with the backed up data. I might want to start a new company file with a backed up data. If I had the backup data teaching courses like this, I can give people practice data to start from that baseline and then already have data in the file that they can be working on. So that's from a student standpoint, from a learning standpoint, the backups can be very useful. They're also really useful if you want to test something. For example, if I'm going to do something like import a bunch of data, or if I'm going to import a bunch of bank feeds or something like that, and I'm worried about it, and I could back up my system first, then import all the data and see what kind of craziness happens. And if I don't like the craziness, then I can restore my data from before I did that. That kind of use for the backup file, not so easy to be dealing with the online system because it's not designed to do that. It's just designed for you not to lose the stuff that you did. It's not designed for you to say, hey, I want to stop and make a backup right here because I'm going to do something crazy and then I'm not sure if it's going to work and then I'd like to restore it if it doesn't. So that kind of thing that the online backup system is not quite designed for. So it's going to be a little bit different in the format of that. So just be aware that the online system, whether you're talking about Xero or QuickBooks Online, pretty secure, probably more secure than for losing your data. But if you're looking at alternative reasons for using the backup file, then it may not be as useful. Now, the other thing we use backup files for in a traditional setting for QuickBooks Desktop is to take the backup file and then give that backup file to the accountant at year end, so that we don't have to give them all the reports or anything. We just say, hey, here's here's the file. You can dig up on what, don't ask me for the reports, just go find them yourself. And it's kind of nice for them to have the backup file if I don't want them even manipulating my company file. I just want them to find whatever they need to make the tax return, right? And then do that. So that's nice for QuickBooks Desktop. However, QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online or Xero, you can give access to the accountant to your file, and usually there's no added cost to that. So for that kind of setup, it might be easier as well because you can give access to your accountant. Not only that, but you can give access probably more easily than the desktop version to your accountant to make changes when you need them. Hopefully you trust your accountant possibly to say, hey, I want to enter these just-seen entries or something like that, and just allow them to do it with the QuickBooks Online software. So that is a tool that's probably a plus most of the time for the online softwares, that you can have other users that, such as the accountant, put in the information into the system, provide that information to the accountant in a similar fashion, and without the need basically for a backup for that type of situation. So those are kind of the pros and cons of the backup. Now, if you wanted to backup like the raw data, like the bank feed data or the register data, you may be able to basically kind of export the kind of raw data information, and you could possibly use that to some degree, export things like the vendors and the customers, and then the data transactions in the bank and whatnot, and possibly use that to some degree to kind of reconstruct something if you needed to. But typically it's not, the online system isn't really designed as with the desktop system. I mean, in a desktop system, it's really easy to just basically make a backup, and then I can even make a new company file and restore the backup to another company file. And I'm pretty confident with that. It works pretty well. It's not quite the same way with the online version where you can do that. You can back up certain things and certain items, but it's not really designed generally to back up the entire system. Now, if you're exporting to a new system, then you can look, how can I export this information and import it if I was moving from one software to the other, such as the desktop version to the online version. But again, that's usually more of kind of like a project. It's usually something that's a one-time kind of thing. It's not something that's really designed for you to be doing all the time. So just some pros and cons of that. I do like how Xero does have the option here you could set up multiple files here. So note that I can add a new company file, and I can do some of that testing information even with the online software without basically, in the demo version here, without setting up another account with Xero. And I really like that, because you might be able to get in a system where you have, you could set up multiple files in here and do some information, do some testing on multiple files. If I want to test a bank feed or something like that, and which is one of the reasons I might want a backup file in my other, with QuickBooks. If I want to test something, I can make up a new file here. It won't have all my data in it from the prior system, but I could set up possibly a new file and just upload the bank feeds, test out whatever I want to do, and see if it creates a mess from that point, and decide whether or not I want to upload it to my actual file. So that I really like, and that could kind of substitute for some of the needs for a backup file other than simply securing the current data that's currently in the system.